Arthur's Cook Publishers present The Book of Gabriel, The Revelation Stone by Chris Cook and Caroline Arthurs Cook. Read by Tanj Finnegan with music by Matt Brimmelcombe.
Chapter 6. The Zamatarian Clerics. As soon as the 7 Slemevoids who had been attacking Amelia saw me, they made a quick escape, knowing their chance to stop her from meeting me had been lost the moment I appeared. Since they dared not challenge me, when they disappeared from the woods, they flew to Keswick, nearly 22 miles north. Amelia did not notice how much time had passed since we first met. So extraordinary was her experience that she was not aware of the time, nor did she give any thought to Mrs. O'Brien or the rowing team, and how they might react to her absence. By the time the large, dark lake and the rubber duck came into view, she had carefully stowed her revelation stone in her pocket. Her journey up the mountain had taken her 3 hours, and the journey back down was almost another 3, so it was nearly 10:30 p.m. as she crossed the car park. When she turned the corner to head towards the front entrance, she noticed a few police cars, a couple of which still had their blue lights flashing, and it was at this point she realized that the police may have been called for her. Ordinarily, so much attention would have caused her some anxiety, but she was still on such a high from her experience that it was eclipsed by the feeling that all would be well. Amelia walked through the main doors and saw that the foyer and the dining area was crowded with Mrs. O'Brien, a number of police officers, some dogs, the girls from a rowing team, and several members of staff from the Rubber Duck, including Nancy, Warren, Claude, and Lionel. "There she is," Alice called out. Amelia perceived some genuine concern in the girl's voice. "Amelia, thank goodness," Mrs. O'Brien said, clearly relieved. She rushed over to Amelia and embraced her. "And where have you been all this time, young lady?" she added angrily. "Do you have any idea of the degree of stress and worry that you've caused us here?" "I have a right mind to cancel this expedition and head straight back to London this very minute." I'm really sorry. I decided to go for a walk and just got a little caught up in the woods," Amelia offered. "A little caught up? The police were just about to send officers in London to inform your mother her daughter had disappeared. We didn't know where you were, whether you'd been abducted or lost in the mountains or even drowned in the lake." Amelia knew Mrs. O'Brien was furious with her, and she watched her look across at Claude, Nancy, and several of the other staff who were still talking to the police. She noticed a look of relief pass between them all, before Mrs. O'Brien continued chastising her. "The stress you've caused is no joke, young lady, and I expect you to apologise to these good officers and then get to bed straight away." Nancy walked over to Mrs. O'Brien and stood beside her. She put a hand on her arm, seeming to offer some comfort. "Hey, Amelia, we're all just glad to see you're safe," Nancy began, kindness evident in her tone. "And I'm sure you're very tired. You should probably get some sleep, and maybe you and your coach could discuss this in the morning. What do you think, Radhika?" Nancy turned her attention to Mrs. O'Brien, who nodded in agreement, though she was looking down at the carpet. "I'm truly sorry for any trouble I've caused you all today," said Amelia, the first sign of embarrassment bringing a pink glow that crept up her neck and her face. She found it strange that the police hadn't spoken to her, but thought they might come back in the morning. While she walked up the stairs to room 19, she heard Olivia, Sophie, and Scarlett giggling as they had done earlier during lunch, and Amelia knew the girls would now have a tremendous amount of material with which to tease her mercilessly for at least the rest of the trip, if not the whole school year. Sure enough, the other girls followed behind her, and Amelia was barely in the room a minute before they burst in without knocking. Alice, where do you suppose your roomie has been for this last 6 hours?" asked Erin, nudging Wendy. "I'm guessing it probably involved one of those hot country boys, judging from the amount of foundation she's wearing," Wendy accused. All the girls apart from Alice and Amelia laughed. "Unlike you girls, I've never worn makeup in my entire life," Amelia responded boldly. "Yeah, whatever, Crater. Well, that's a lie if ever I've heard one," Erin snapped. No, wait. Maybe it was Claude. We all saw how she was playing old core with him at lunch. And come to think of it, didn't he go missing for a while too?" Sophie mocked. Alice looked at Amelia and smiled. "So what actually happened, Amelia?" she asked. Her genuine concern was noticed by Amelia and the other girls. Amelia kicked off her shoes and lay down on her bed. "Like I said, I went into the woods for a walk, just got a little caught up, that's all." "But did you lose your way? You were gone for so long." Alice returned to her questioning. I was so worried that I asked Mrs. Brennan to call the police. For some strange reason, she didn't want to do it, so I was the one that called them." The girls paused in their pursuit to mock and considered Alice, fascinated that her attitude towards Amelia seemed to have changed. But before Amelia could answer, the heavy thud of Mrs. O'Brennan's feet on the stairs distracted them. "And what's going on in here? I want to see every one of you girls in your rooms with the lights out in 5 minutes," she asserted as she loomed through the open door of room 19. Amongst mumbles of "party pooper" and "killjoy," the girls reluctantly returned to their rooms, a few of them still giggling over Sophie's clawed comment. Rodica stood where she was and watched the door to each room close, and the hall return to quiet. "Now then, that goes for you two. Lights out in 5 minutes," she said before closing the door. Amelia went to use the bathroom and change into her pyjamas. It was while she was brushing her teeth that she noticed her complexion had changed. She splashed some water on her face and rubbed vigorously, and realized why Wendy and the others had assumed she was wearing makeup. Except for a soft spattering of freckles across her nose, her skin was flawless. Then she started to giggle as she recalled how I had said that her prayers had been answered. She was happy and relieved that the girls would never be able to get her again by calling her crater face. The little miracle, though very important to her, would stand as a constant reminder that the supernal experience she'd had that night was real. She emerged from the bathroom wearing pyjamas and a huge smile, and crept over to her bed. She had concealed the revelation stone, having wrapped it in one of her t-shirts and slid it beneath her pillow, then climbed into bed. "I'm really glad you're okay," said Alice, who was still awake. "Thank you," replied Amelia, intrigued and surprised by how much Alice was behaving like her old self again. She moved her hand below her pillow and felt her revelation stone before reaching for her blue rabbit and was finally able to fall asleep. Shortly after 2:45 a.m., while all was still silent, Amelia heard a voice in her dream. It was a soothing, feminine voice with a similar tone to that of Mary's, but distinct enough for Amelia to know it belonged to someone else. "Amelia, you need to wake up now," the voice urged over and over again. Amelia stirred in her sleep, hearing the voice once more. She opened her eyes and raised her head to look around the room. Her attention was immediately drawn back to her pillow and the bright light seeping out from her newly acquired revelation stone she had stowed beneath it hours before. She glanced over at Alice's bed and noticed she was still fast asleep facing the window. Reassured that she was not being watched, she retrieved the stone, and just as her fingers touched it, she was instantaneously wafted away from her room and amazed to find herself hovering above the bed and breakfast. Amelia had a 360-degree view above the building and hovered over the road. It was still dark, and only the rubber duck sign illuminated the car park directly below it. The only other light came from the street lamps that ran along the road for 300 meters in either direction. She could see nothing else except the moon's reflection glinting on the lake and the stars shining brightly in the cloudless night sky. Quite suddenly, Amelia was struck by a horrid, fearful feeling of apprehension that something terrible was about to happen. She clutched her chest as she felt her heart rate increase. She saw 7 powerful motorcycles riding towards the rubber duck and stopped on the roadside. 4 men and 3 women wearing black leathers dismounted and walked up to the front and around the sides of the bed and breakfast. Fear welled up in Amelia as she focused on a man and woman who were each carrying a black plastic petrol can and rucksack. They went to opposite ends of the building and placed each of the rucksacks by the side entrances and splattered fuel onto the front and side walls of the old building. Just as they were about to go to the rear, they were alerted by another biker who was pointing to the road in the distance. They could hear the sounds of approaching sirens. The man and woman both took a couple of steps away and lit matches and threw them towards the fuel-soaked walls of the building, which instantly ignited and quickly followed the fuel trail round the walls, spreading up the trained wisteria and roses, finally towards the windows. Flames licked at the wooden gables, and soon the bed and breakfast was almost entirely engulfed in fire and black smoke. The man and woman ran back to their bikes to join the others, who had all pulled out submachine firearms, who aimed their weapons at the walls and windows of the building and then opened fire. Amelia was so alarmed by what she was witnessing and was fearful for the occupants still inside. But then, Just as instantly, she found herself lying on her bed in a dark, quiet room, handling her revelation stone as before. She looked towards the windows, but she couldn't see any flames. Amelia heard the same feminine voices as she had in her dream. "You have 3 minutes. Wake the others and leave now." She knew she had been allowed to see briefly into the future, and that they all had a very short time before the 7 bikers would arrive. She slipped on her shoes, stowed her revelation stone in her jacket pocket, and put her blue rabbit in her bag before rushing over to Alice, who was still fast asleep. "Alice," she said loudly, firmly shaking Alice's shoulder while craning her neck to see out the window. No sign of them yet, she thought. "Alice, please, we're in so much danger. You need to get up and come with me." "Amelia, what in the world? What time is it?" replied Alice, quite disgruntled that her sleep had been disturbed. "You're not going to believe this, but there is a group of 7 assassins outside with guns," Amelia muttered, grabbing Alice's jeans and thrusting him in her lap. "Now hurry up and get dressed before we all get shot. We have to wake the others." "A group of assassins with guns? What are you talking about?" Alice said, still half sleeping. She was having a hard time believing Amelia's story, but she hastily pulled on her jeans and without giving it another thought grabbed her Backstreet Boys photo and stuffed it in her bag. Alice looked out of the window, but she couldn't see anything. "I can't see anyone out here, Amelia. Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" "Trust me. They're on their way. Don't ask me. I know. Just trust me. Now we need to wake the others without causing a panic." Both girls headed for the door, and as she was about to exit, Amelia wanted to grab as many of her belongings as possible. Then she thought how practical that idea was as she noticed her birthday cake in the plastic container that Mary had given her. Since she had a revelation stone, which had become a most precious possession, she continued out the door. "We need to wake everyone else in the building, but tell them not to panic and no lights. You start at the end of the corridor and I'll start from here," said Amelia. "Okay," said Alice. "And Alice, please don't freak out, but you need to know that they will also set the building on fire." "Fire? Why? Who are these people?" asked Alice, adrenaline now flowing as they knocked on first doors. "I don't know, but we're running out of time." They knocked on all the doors, desperate to wake everyone. "Where are we going to go?" Amelia thought frantically, suddenly remembering that she did not see the leather-clad, gun-wielding mob at the rear of the building, so could lead everybody out the back door. She then decided she must call the police. Alice had acted so quickly that within a few seconds Amelia looked down the hall and saw Sophie and Erin joining in and alerting the others. Erin had a mobile phone in her hand, so Amelia ran down to her. "Erin, call the police and tell them that the bed and breakfast is under attack. Oh, and call the fire brigade too." "Really, Amelia? I don't hear anything," Erin responded. "I hope this isn't some prank because it's not going to go down very well with your previous—" "Erin, you're talking too much. Just do it, please," Amelia asserted. "What's going on here?" said a deep voice behind her. Startled, Amelia turned to see Emmett standing behind her. "I know this is going to sound very crazy, but we're going to be attacked by a group of bikers outside, literally any moment now." "Are you certain?" he asked calmly. "I am." "In that case, we have no time to waste." Emmett helped wake the few other guests. As Amelia approached room 20, she was preparing herself that there was a good chance Mrs. O'Brennan would not believe her. "Mrs. O'Brennan!" She urgently knocked at the locked door. Within seconds, her coach opened the door, and straight away Amelia noticed that although she was wrapped in a long dressing gown, she was wearing tracksuit bottoms and trainers. It was as if she had been awake already, and was waiting by the door for Amelia to knock on it. "I would love to discover the cause for your disturbing me at this ridiculous hour," said Mrs. O'Brennan in her usual stern voice. She took a look up and down the hall and saw that most of the girls and several of the staff were heading down the stairs. "Hey, best to go to the back instead of the front," Amelia hissed to Emmett, who Amelia noticed looked past her to Mrs. O'Brennan and nodded. She turned back to Mrs. O'Brennan, who was looking down the hall. "Please, Mrs. O'Brennan, there are people outside the B&B who'll set it on fire and have machine guns, and in like a couple of minutes they'll shoot us," Amelia said, trying to remain calm, knowing the attack was imminent. "Well, have the police been called?" "Yes, I've just asked Erin to call them," replied Amelia, startled at how quickly Mrs. O'Brennan had believed her. "Hurry, we'd better get you and the other girls to safety," said Mrs. O'Brennan. Amelia could now hear the deep rumbling sounds of the motorcycles that had pulled up outside. "Please keep quiet," said Mrs. O'Brennan, as she rushed over to the drawn curtain and peeped through. "All the others are making their way downstairs." Alice, who ran into the room, suddenly stopped as she heard the sound of the bikes and then pushed past Amelia to see through the window as well. Both Alice and Mrs. O'Brennan saw the two motorcyclists walking towards the building with petrol containers in their hands. Mortified to see that Amelia was telling the truth, they rushed out of the room and down the stairs, trying to go as quietly yet as fast as possible. "Amelia, Alice, Radhika, quickly, follow me," said Nancy Lou, who was waiting for them at the bottom of the stairs. They were just making their way out of the back door when they smelled the smoke. And then came the extremely loud, terrifying sounds of automatic gunfire, accompanied by the sounds of shattering glass and the dull thud of gunshots colliding with walls and furniture. The fire alarm was blaring, which made Amelia's ears throb, and the sprinklers had already been activated. "Everyone get down," Nancy shouted before ducking down on the floor and hurriedly crept to the back door. A deafening explosion boomed, and the entire structure shuddered as the right wing of the building collapsed. Amelia and Alice shrieked and sprinted with Mrs. O'Brennan as fast as they could towards the other girls and Emmett, who had found cover at the back of the property near some woods. While they made their way further into the woods and away from the building, Nancy turned back. Covering her mouth to avoid breathing in the brick dust and smoke, she reached into her thigh pocket, her hand emerging with a grenade. From the side of the building closest to the bikers, she pulled the pin and lobbed it towards them at the front. The live explosive landed and rolled beneath one of the motorcycles before detonating, releasing a strange red mist and sending the bike flying up into the air. Then Claude, Lionel, and Clock rushed from the undemolished side of the building, each brandishing a pistol and opened fire at the group of assassins. The bikers rushed for cover amid a hail of bullets that were coming their way, and 3 of the bikers fell to the ground. "Get back!" screamed Clark, as he noticed the other rucksack propped up against the wall of the burning building. As it exploded, it threw him, Lionel, and Clark violently across the yard, and part of the left flank of the building collapsed. The 4 remaining assailants could hear emergency service sirens getting louder and louder, and seeing that they still had stiff competition from Warren and Nancy, the leather-clad assassins stopped firing, left their fallen companions behind, mounted their motorbikes, and sped away. After failing to stop Amelia from meeting me the evening before, Adrian Faust's loyal Slemevoid followers had found a small band of biking enthusiasts near Keswick and had taken possession of their bodies. They were determined to kill Amelia before she became too powerful and too skilled in using her revelation stone, but had underestimated the level of protection that already surrounded her. You see, Nancy, Clark, Claude, Lionel, Emmett and Warren, as well as the other guests, were not regular rubber duck bed and breakfast staff, but members of a secret society of protectors known as the Order of the Zamatarian Clerics. Radhika O'Brennan was also part of the order, whose primary duties included protecting Amelia. They would use every means to fulfill this mission. They were a highly skilled elite group of fighters, trained in all aspects of combat and close personal protection. In spite of their training as skilled assassins, the Zamatarian clerics subscribed to a very strict code of conduct, foremost of which was to safeguard the life of all humans. In doing so, the only bullets they ever used were made up of a liquid element called ELE, or ether luminant element. This very precious and unique element, which was usually encapsulated in a special rubber casing, was a type of liquid metal that evaporated at high temperature, particularly when it was discharged from a firearm. Now, this fantastic weapon was entirely harmless to the human body, but was lethal to the Slemevoids' spiritual bodies. Thus, the Zamatarian clerics were able to wage an effective war against their spiritual enemies. They considered it to be a gift from heaven, also calling it the 5th element. It was first discovered in 1744 by a French farmer who had connections to the order and who, one night, found an unusual alien rock in his backyard shortly after a meteor shower. The strange rock oozed with what seemed to be a red liquid lava, but the lava was not hot. After many investigations, the clerics discovered small quantities of the curious red lava all over the world and over time developed it as a weapon to use against the Slemevoids. The Slemevoids had long learned to never try to take possession of the body of a cleric. Upon accepting the calling to join the Zamatarian order, a cleric's initiation involved ingesting the ether luminant capsule a red capsule with an edible amount of ELE. The order began to implement this practice as a means of avoiding clerics becoming possessed by Slemevoids. There had been sad cases of clerics who had been under the complete power of Slemevoids in times of old, for despite rigorous training to resist embodiment, every cleric constantly remained at high risk. Amelia was given a dose as a baby, and without knowing it, Mary and her other daughters had also ingested theirs many years earlier. The Slemevoids could always discover who clerics were by the nauseating smell they gave off. It was an odour that could only be smelt by Slemevoids. If a Slemevoid felt brave enough to attempt to take over the body of a fully initiated cleric, the result would be fatal. Warren went over to assess the three bikers' bodies, who had been possessed by Abaddon, Felicia, and Zebulon, who, having seen the approaching grenade, severed themselves from their human bodies and made a narrow escape. The clerics could see that the three bikers were unconscious, a normal effect of being possessed and then severed from Slemevoids, placed them in a recovery position. No human ever recalled the experience of being possessed by a Slemevoid, and that is a good thing. A very good thing, too. I dare say the encounter would irrevocably sully the mind of even the most virtuous human. Warren joined Nancy, Claude, Clark, and Lionel below the rubber duck sign, facing the burning remains of the building. Each of them were suffering from scrapes, cuts, and other minor injuries. "Please conceal your weapons before the services arrive," Nancy ordered, as she looked around to see if they were being watched, and saw Emmett jogging over to them. "The girls are all safe. I've left Rodica and the few other guests with them," he said just as the emergency services came into view. "Looks like we managed to take a few of them out then," said Clark, indicating to the three bikers lying motionless on the ground. "Is Amelia okay?" Claude asked as he pushed his weapon back down his jeans and pulled his shirt over it. "Yeah, thankfully," Emmett replied as he concealed his weapon likewise. "It's a miracle we were all able to act as fast as we did," Nancy continued, looking towards Claude. "You know, I met the entire group already on the top of the stairs," said Emmett. "It seems Amelia was awake already. She'd gotten everyone up and was in the process of getting them out before I even got there." "So she started her mission in earnest then," Claude said. "The enemy must have known she'd have a rendezvous with the messenger yesterday." "Yeah, it's no wonder they're stepping up their campaign," Lionel observed, sounding grim. "The Slemevoids are definitely becoming more hostile." "Without a doubt. Tonight was a little too close for comfort. It could have easily gone wrong," Clark said, walking towards 2 fire engines, 3 armed response units, and 2 ambulances that had pulled into the car park. "All in a day's work," he sighed, as the lead fireman jumped out for the pump ladder's cab and landed on the ground near them.